Hi there and welcome to Darlene's Creative Studio. I am going to be doing a quick tutorial on making my little password book. I make this from my cinch binder with these coils and this binding machine, which you will see later. The cover is just a piece of chipboard, and I just recycle old binders and cut the vinyl off and save the chipboard that is inside the binders. So I'll be using one piece of that for the covers. And then on the inside, all I've done is printed on an 8.5 by 11. I do 2 pages, and then when I go to print them, I print pages 1 and 2 on both sides. So it ends up being a double-sided page, and they end up being in the exact same spots. So when I take this to my printer, it's 8.5 by 11. I'm going to be cutting this at 4 1/4 by 5.5, and that will give me my page sizes. And then what I've done, just to make it a little better, this was a lot wider, so I've just trimmed the width down. So you have your 4 1/4 by 5.5, and then I keep the 5.5. But I trim this to 3 3/4. So I take off about 1/2 inch off of here because you end up with this big white space on this side. You need to have at least 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch from the side of your paper on the left hand side to where your words are for your cinch, for your coil. I'm going to be putting these in my binder, my binding machine, and you punch the holes, and you need to have room for the holes and still be able to have a little bit of space between that and your words. So the left side of your paper needs to have at least 3/4 inch. This side does not, because this is just going to be the edge of your book. So when you flip it over, and I do it this way, this will be closer to the left hand side, like that. So I'm just going to close that because there's all my passwords in it. So this is what I'm going to end up with. I think I printed 12 double-sided sheets and cut them in half and half, had a little pile, and then I took them over to my cutter and I cut them to 3 3/4 width by 5.5. So there's my pile. I will be putting those in the punch machine later on. But what we're going to do now is we're going to be creating the covers. And for this one, the cover is just a tiny bit bigger. For these purposes, I'm going to make my cover, so the width of my page is 3 3/4. I'm going to make the width of my cover by 4 inches. I'm going to use this piece of paper here, so it's 4 inches wide. And what I'm doing is I'm giving myself 1/4 inch above and 1/4 inch below. So it's going to be 4 by 6 is what I'm going to need. And on this side, it's going to line up with the pages. And on this side, I'm going to have that 1/4 inch. So I'm going to need a 4 by 6 inch piece of chipboard for both the front and the back cover. So I will move that out of the way. I will move this out of the way. And I found 2 planner pages. These are my mom's old planner pages that she gave me. And I just grabbed 2 that were similar. These ones have some, I know, vintage book in the picture, and so does this one. So I thought these would be great for the cover. So if my cover is 4 by 6, I have to have at least 4 inches by 6 inches somewhere on that page and 1/2 inch around, because you're going to be folding that over the chipboard. So you're going to be needing a 5 by 7 piece, and this is going to give me my 5 by 7 on both of these pieces. So I have more than enough use for these. So that will be the paper I'm covering. The reason I'm using paper is when I put the chipboard into my binding machine and punch the holes, if I use fabric, it will not punch the holes properly because the fabric gets caught in the little punches. I have to use paper because it'll punch through the paper and the chipboard. So what I'm going to do now is cut this. I'm going to cut the width by 4 inches this way from this flat edge, because this binder has 2 square corners and then 2 rounded corners, and this would be the front of the binder. So I'm going to measure 6 inches, from this flat side here. And I only need about 8 inches, so let's do. So what I will do is I will get my knife, and I'm going to mark, and you probably have a glare from my ruler, from my light above. So I'm going to be cutting that there, and I'm just going to flip my blade around because I want a sharper blade, a brand new blade for when I'm cutting this. All right, so now that we've got that there, make sure it's on my cut. I'm going to be cutting my chipboard, and you don't push hard, you just keep a steady cut on your knife and keep it flat and try and keep it straight. You don't want to have your blade on an angle, then you get a funny cut. So I'm just going to keep, it takes about 7 or 8. This is about 100 or 0.10 thickness. You can use a thinner chipboard, and I may have to with my binding machine, might not get through this chipboard, but I'm going to go ahead and try, and then if it doesn't, I will just cut 2 thinner pieces. There you go, I can feel it cut right there. There we go. So that is my 6-inch piece. So if I take one of these papers, and then I'm going to cut a 4-inch piece. So that's what my cover will be. It'll be lined up at the edge of this, but it'll have a 1/4 inch all the way around. So now I'm going to cut, this is 6 inches. Now we're going to cut 4 inches. And that will be my front cover. Right there and there. And you can actually, I'm just going to get my bone folder. Where I cut it, it leaves like a little edge where I cut. So I just take my bone folder and rub along there so I get a nice flat surface. And you can use a corner angle and make sure that you get exactly a square cut. But this is just a little book for myself, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. So now we're going to cut the 4-inch. There we go. And then all I'm going to do, just going to rub that piece flat, is take this piece and lay it right on top of this piece. Make sure it's nice and flush on both tops and bottoms. And then I'm just going to cut very slowly the first one, just makes that groove, and then cut right through. Get that there then, now that I've got my groove. There. So there are my 2 covers, my front and back cover. And when I put my book page in there, I probably don't even need it that big. It actually seems a bit long, but so you can trim it back to whatever you like. I think I might trim a little tiny bit more off of that. So let's see. If I put this down a little bit more. So I want about the same edge that I have there. So that's 3/8. Yeah, so I only want about 3/8, so I've got a little bit extra there. So I'll go ahead and trim those up. But that's what you're going to do. You're going to, once you get them cut, you're going to put your book page on top of the chipboard just to see where you want them. And if you do want them a little bit smaller, like say I'm going to cut off a little bit there, maybe even a little bit more. And then, so I just have that little tiny edge around the outside. So I'm going to trim these up a little bit more. I'll trim the first one and then use it as my template for the second one. So I think I'm just going to take that 3/8 off. Let's measure where my little measurement is. Yeah, so I think it's about 3/8 that I going to take off. So there's one. And there's two. And what I'm going to do is have the smaller edge on the outside. It will cut faster if you do that. So we're just going to line up our marks. There. Cut off that amount. Let's just double check it. And again, use your roll folder to flatten it out. Yeah, I'm a little happier with that. So I just have a little edge around the outside of my cover. So let's cut this one down. And again, the same thing. I'm just going to use this as my template and lay it down on top. Make sure it's nice and flush. Lay it down on its side. And then go ahead and cut that little bit off. Once you do the first 2 or 3 swipes, you can actually move the top piece. You don't have to, but you can actually move it out of the way because you have your groove. There we go. So cut that off. So there's my top piece and my bottom. There's my covers. And that's where my paper is going to sit inside of it. So next what we're going to do is cover the outside of the chipboard with the paper. And you need about, half an inch. That looks about half an inch, right? Yeah. So you need about a half an inch of an inch because you're going to be folding that over the top. So we just need to cut a little bit off of the end of this. So let's just do it by eyeballing it. Let's say where half an inch is. So middle of the birdies here. So right about there. There we go. So there we go. So we have that piece. And then we're going to do the same thing with this one. I'm going to cut it. Do I want the butterfly in the book? I think I'm going to cut it from the edge, like right about there. And they're not perfectly straight, so I'm not too worried about that. So I'm just going to draw a little line around the outside of this. Grab my scissors. And this one doesn't have any writing on the back, which is good. And again, this doesn't have to be perfect. If it's a little wobbly, that's okay because it's going to be folded over the edge. Because once you get it glued on, you want it to be square where you want it on when you're gluing it. So we're just going to cut that off. So that is going to be my front and my back covers. This is going to be my front because I'm going to put a label on there that says passwords. So next what we're going to need is some glue. Make sure I'm still in the frame here. And I use Elmer's all-purpose glue. And I am going to use, it's not here. I have a little roller that I like to use. I don't see it offhand. I like to use a little roller and squirt the glue onto the chipboard and then spread it out. And I'm just going to grab my silicone mat here. I'm going to lay that down. And I'm just going to shake up my glue a little bit. And this was a hair color bottle that I had a long time ago. And I use this as my glue bottle because the Elmer's glue I purchased is in a great big huge container. And this comes out really nicely. Now you can use a roller or you can just use a simple paintbrush. And I might just do the paintbrush because the roller's not really ready. So let's try my paintbrush here. And all you want to do is get a nice thin coating. And you want to make sure you get right to the edges. You don't want it to be too thick, but you do want to get the whole surface. I'm just going to turn it around and do this side. Like that. Make sure you get your corners. And then we're going to decide where we want this to sit on this paper. And I think it was about a ½ inch all around. So we're just going to lay it down on the paper. Try not to put it in the glue. Like that. And I'm just going to grab my brayer. And roll that out. Like that. Let's do the other one. The first piece. Now let's do the second piece of chipboard. Take our glue. And we'll spread the glue out on our, so we're not going to use that. Use our paintbrush and just spread the glue out nice and evenly. And make sure you get right to your edges. Again, you don't want a thick layer because if you do, your chipboard will bend because of the moisture. So you just want a nice light layer. Okay, so that. And then we're going to take our next piece and the same thing. I'm just going to try not to set it in the glue, so I'll move it over here. And then we're just going to lay our chipboard down into the center of this picture and have that ½ inch all the way around. Right, and I'm going to flip it over. And I'm just going to roll it out. Oops. Like that. Let's get rid of this. Put it over there. Make sure I keep my brush handy because we're going to need that again. Okay, so now we're going to cut the edges, and you need to leave at least 1/8 of an inch from the point of your cardboard to so that when we bend it over, you'll cover that corner. So you just want to cut a little angle cut, and I do have a cutter, but I don't have it with me, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut it by hand here. So you're just cutting off the edges, but leaving a little bit there. There we go. Same thing. I'm going to leave that little bit there. Like that. And then all I'm going to do is take the edges of my chipboard and I'm going to bend that paper around the corner like that, just to get it bent. And then we're just going to squirt some glue. Let's do the long edges first. Along the edge here, and along the edge here. And we're just going to brush some glue on the edges. And I try and make sure I get the little edge of the chipboard as well. And then I'm just going to bend that paper forward and slide it up there like that. And then on that corner, I'm just going to bend down that paper. So I'm pushing it up against the edge of the chipboard and I'm pushing that little edge in. Like that. Okay, let's do the other side. my edges, and I'm just putting a little bit of glue on that paper there. And you can do it this way by bending it over. And it's good to keep a little cloth handy to wipe some of the glue that oozes everywhere. Just got my cloth here. And again, you're going to push down along the edge of that chipboard and pull that little piece of paper in a bit. Try not to tear it. I just tore that side a tiny little bit. So you're just bending in that little piece a little tiny bit. Now we're going to do the other side. And again, we need our paintbrush. Like that. And you're just going to bend that forward. And push down your corners. Like that. And along the edge there. And I'm just going to bend that forward a bit. Like that. And you want to rub down your corners. And there is one of the covers. And then I'm just going to take my cloth and make sure my corners are pushed down. So that will be the back cover. Okay, now let's do the front. Again, we're going to cut our corners off. And leaving that 1/8 of an inch away from that point. There we go, and one more. Like that. And then we're going to start with the long edges. Oh, let's bend our paper. This makes it easier when you go to push the paper over the sides. And again, just rub it along the edges there. And then bend it over. And I'll rub my bone folder across the edge. And then again, push down and pull that little tiny piece of paper in. Right there. All right, let's do the other side. Like that. And then we're going to push our corners in like that, and do our other two sides. You just pull those corners in like that. And there we go. There is our front cover. And that's covered with the paper. So we have our front and back covers, same size, and I'm going to be punching my holes on the edges, and I'm going to be punching my paper as well. So next I'm going to be getting out the binding. Next we have to put some inside paper in here, because once we get the paper in there, then we punch the holes, and then we won't have to worry about the inside. So we're going to find some inside paper and glue that down, and I'm going to get up my punch and my binding machine. That'll be our next step. I have grabbed some scraps that were on my table as I'm still working on my December daily challenge. So I do have some scraps there, and I just took a piece of scrap cardstock, and I know that these are 4 inches by, and they were 6, but we cut them down, so they're 5 3/4. And all I'm going to do is take about 1/8 of an inch off the edges. So this is now 3 7/8. So I'm just taking 1/8 of an inch off the top and the bottom of the measurement of the cover, and I'm going to glue these down. And I'm actually going to just stress the edges of these. With some vintage photo. So there's that one. So you're just taking the measurement of the cover of your book, and you're taking 1/8 of an inch off of the measurement. So you're ending up with 1/16 of an inch kind of all around. And then I'm just going to glue this on. We'll use our Elmer's glue here. Just going to put a little bit on here. Make sure I do my edges and my corners. And to make sure they're upside right. So this is my front cover. Like that. I'm just going to roll that out. And make sure I have my rag handy because this is kind of oozing out the edges. Oops, just knocked my other cardstock off. All right, and let's glue the other one on. Make sure it's facing the right side up. And we're just going to set this piece on there, like that. And the same thing, just going to go from the center out and roll my page, and then just wipe the edges where the glue has oozed out a bit. I did move my paper, whoops, just a smidgy. There we go. Okay, so we're going to let those dry. And then, so that's the back cover, and that's the front. So for, this is my cinch punch, and I'm just going to move some of this stuff over. What I'm going to show you how I punch the papers. And all I do is get a scrap piece of paper. So there's my cinch. Open this up. And I take a scrap piece of paper, and I cut it to the same size as my page. So I believe this is 5 1/2. Yeah, so it's 5 1/2. And then I just keep punching the paper until I find where I like. So I've folded this in half, so that's my paper. And then I slide this in, and I'm just going to line these up because I just moved my little punch here. I think that's the same. And I just line this up, and this is the little thing, the edge that you're going to be using, and I try to make sure that I rub this along the back a couple of times, because I find once you punch, some of these little pieces that you punch get stuck in those holes, and it gives you a lopsided punch. So you want to make sure that they're clear, and then you just want to punch down like that. See, and that will give you your hole. And there's 2 that were not punching very well. And then what I normally do is grab my ruler, and I just make sure that I have about the same width on each end. So there's 1 1/2, and see, this one's a little bit more on this side, so that means I have to go in 1. And I just keep playing with it until I get where I want. I'm just going to cut this piece of paper. Until I get where I want the punch, what the punch location should be. so that it's nice and even in between. And again, I just keep measuring. So that's 2, and I've gone too far. I got to go this way more. I know it's not all the way in. So I just keep playing with that until you get the desired punch location. And so for this one, I've already punched some of the pages. So I want to line this up. And I'm just going to keep playing with it until I get where I want it to be. So I'm just going to cut this. And let's punch that one more time just to see if that's where we want the punch. Those two aren't punching all the way, so I'll have to. And then I'm going to line it up with this page. See, it's how it's off a slight amount. So I need it to go this way by 1. There. So we keep playing with it until we get it where we want it, and then we'll punch the rest of our pages. That one's not going to work. So let's do the 5.5. I'm just going to cut this to 5.5. And let's push this one in and see if that's the right location. And I had this set up, but I just hit that little bump there in it. There we go. So there's my 5.5-inch page, and my holes are all lined up. So I'm just going to punch those last few pages. And again, you're punching on the left-hand side where you have that 3/4 inch gap. And you're just going to slide the paper in. And again, you make sure you've got that nice, clean entry in the back. And then you just punch down. And you get your punches. So all of your papers will be punched in the exact location for when you put your coils in. Next, we're going to work on the cover of the books. So let me just grab the cover and we'll work on that one. Okay, now for the 2 front covers. So there's my front and there's my back, and you're going to put them together just like you would when you're going to be using the book. And I've gone ahead and cut a piece of paper that is the same height as the cover. And I'm going to keep them together this way and set them aside for just a moment. Now, because the cover is a little bit bigger, we have to try and line up these holes. And this is where we're going to play a little bit. We want to line up the holes so that they are about the same width from the top. So that's 2 and a bit, and that one's 2. So that's pretty close to where I want them. And all I've done is taken this and kind of drawn. That's probably even wrong. Let's see. This is the size of my paper, and that's where my holes are. So that's perfect. Then what I do is, I'm going to do it this way so you can see it better. I'm going to lay this piece of paper on top, and see how I'm just leaving a little bit on the top and the bottom. So that's approximately where you want your holes to be. And I'm just going to draw my holes really quickly. Like that. So that when I put this in, and this is going to be my front cover. So that's going to be the left side of my front cover. Okay, so I'm just going to try and line up these holes, and I'm going to have to move my left arm bar until I can get, and that's too far, oops, these holes where I want them. And I think they're still over a bit too far, so I'll do one more. Okay, I'm going to try it there and see how that is. So I'm going to push it in. And first I'm going to rub, make sure all the little pieces are out of the way, and then I'm just going to push that down. And let's see if we've got the right spot. Look at that. Perfect. So now when I put my front cover in, and I'm hoping it'll punch through this chipboard, you want to put your front cover in this way because you want your holes to line up exactly where you've punched them, right? And then for the back cover, you're going to put it in with the inside up. So you're actually going to be putting it in kind of like you're putting both pieces in together. You're going to put your top cover in this way and your bottom cover in this way with the inside up. And I'm just going to go ahead and slide that in. Now this might be too thick to punch, so I might have to get a thinner chipboard. here we go. And all I do is do a little bit at a time. Ooh, almost. And it's down. And you just want to do it a little bit at a time so you can get it to go through. And there you go. So there's my front cover. Now we're going to do the same thing with the inside cover with the inside up, or the back cover with the inside up. So there's my booklet. I'm going to set it in there, and I'm going to make sure it goes all the way to the back. You want to make sure it's touching at the back. So you have to kind of look inside and make sure that it's right at the back. And we're going to do the same thing. A little bit at a time. You don't want to break your punch. And there we go. And pull that out. And there's my back cover. So they're like that. So when we put these two together, we're going to be lining up our holes like that, and you'll be able to see right through all your holes, top and bottom, like that. So there is our little password book, and I'm going to be doing the coils next. So I'm just going to close this up, and we're going to turn it around, and on the back of the machine, I'm just going to turn it up so you can see it. There's a little slot here, and then when you push your bar down, this bar is going to come down and squish your coils. So that's what we're going to be using next. I'm just going to go get the coils and we'll work on that next. So I've gone and grabbed my coils, and they are spread open like this, and this is a 3/4 inch coil in black. So what you do is they have these little bars on the side. You actually loop your stuff on that, and then you put your papers on, but because I have a hard cover, it might not work that way. But what we're going to do first, this is just a piece. They come in 12-inch lengths, and I have to cut this down to fit into the holes I have, because I have 3, 6, 9 holes. So I have to cut 2 of these off. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So what you do is you take it to this side where you have that the wider bend, and I'm going to be cutting 2 of these off. And I'm just going to cut right in the middle of that. And there it goes. So what now you have to do is, and we'll try it this way, see if I can do it this way with the, yeah. So you have to take your outside cover, your back cover, and you have to flip it over and put it on top. Okay, so we're going to start with our papers. And we're going to slide those in the holes like that. Then we put our front cover on, and then we put our back cover on with the inside facing up, because when we squeeze these closed, and let me just take this off, we want these bars that are flat, and where these gather together, that's going to be in the inside back cover, so you won't see it. So we're going to turn this around now. And you have a gauge here that you can set. You just turn this little wheel, and it's already set to 3/4 inches. That's the size of my coil. And all you do is set it in under the machine here with the coils, both the bottom and the top, touching against the back. So I'm just going to set it down here and make sure that it's even and those pieces are touching, and I'm just going to press down on my handle like that. And see how it closes up your little coils? And then when you flip this one around, I'm just going to turn it so that it's, there we go. You now have your coils. They're a little bit wonky, but you now have your coils this way, and see how it's just your normal coils. And when you get to the back, that's where your little closure is, like that. And it's on the inside so you don't see it. So there is my little password book that we've made from chipboard and printing out some paper and using some scrapbooking paper. Now I do have, and I'm just going to fix that little wonky part, I do have this little tiny punch, and it makes little tabs. I'm just going to punch and show you. And I'm going to punch out a couple of these and then fold them over. And I'm going to use these for my sides of my page. And I'm not going to do it alphabetically because I don't really need to do that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do about 5 different tabs, and I'm going to have personal, so like our bills, like our Rogers wireless phone, that kind of stuff, anything to do with the house sort of thing. And then there's going to be courses that I take when I have to log into some different courses, or art related, so I might do that, so I'll do art. And then I'll do business, so any of my logging into GoDaddy or my Weebly or anything like that, my Etsy shop, all my passwords and everything, that will be in the next one. So I'll just have a couple of little tabs here, maybe 4, and I'll split the password book up into 4 different groups. And then if I want to, maybe I'll just put a little tiny tab in between those ones for anything alphabetical, like, you know, Etsy and all that kind of stuff. But I am going to use this little punch to create 4 tabs to put on the edge of this book like that. And let's just punch 4 of them out right now. I have a little bug following me. Okay, so we have our 4 tabs that we will use on the edges to divide it into 4 different groups, and then I'll do the others with the little tiny tabs. But that's it. Now I'm going to add a label onto the front of this. So I'm just going to grab my sticky labels, and I believe I'm just going to use one of these smaller ones like that. And then I'm just going to call it my password notebook. So I think I'm just going to put that on there like that. I'm just looking to see if I have any lighter ones, maybe a little bit lighter. I'm just going to dump these out. Some of them are lighter and some of them are darker tea stained. That one's a little bit lighter. About the same. But that's it. So that's all I'm going to do is just add my label, add some tabs. Maybe on the inside, I'm going to write with my black marker what, personal, art related, business, and then other, and then I'll put those on the sides as well. So that's it. That's making my little password book using the cinch, punch, and press, and some chipboard and some other papers. That's it. Thanks so much for watching. See you real soon. Bye now.